Hello, this is Anne DeGheest, and welcome back. It's May the 28th, 2021. And we have a lot of good news and some things that may not be in the press. So I'm going to be focusing on the first video on an interesting report that estimates an extra 7 to 13 million deaths in addition to the 3 million that have been reported. We may not know about it, but there's a huge surge in South America. And of course, that's the southern hemisphere, so they're coming into their winter. Good news, India is slowing down as well as Europe. And as you know, US is doing great. And on the second video, you don't want to miss that. I'm going to talk about the fact that unvaccinated still are at risk and some very interesting analysis that was done about that. And new data has shown up on long COVID, on strain and variants, and how effective the vaccines are against them. Very important to keep track of that. And so please watch the second video. So what's happening? South America, look at this. It's still surging. There is no slowdown there. And look at the magnitude of the amount of cases per million versus Europe and the US, which is North America as the US and Canada. And the good news, as you can see, India slowing down is driving down there. But South America is unfortunately in trouble. On a worldwide basis, you can see we now have 168 million confirmed cases, 3.5 million deaths, but I'm going to show you that's totally underreported there. And then over 1 billion vaccinations have been given there. The good news is because India is slowing down, you can see the world as a whole is slowing down in confirmed cases. But look at the size of India. There are 27.5 million reported cases, where the US is at 33. So it's pretty clear that in unreported case, probably India is now number one, and it's probably going to pass us in the confirmed case probably in coming weeks. Brazil is still, pretty high up, and Argentina is coming up with a major surge there, and as well as some other South American countries. So on a worldwide basis, since I talked to you a month ago, we've gone from 150 million cases to 169 million cases. And you can really see that surge from India there that's slowing down. That's basically, shaping the curve on a worldwide basis. So South America is this is the southern hemisphere, and as we were afraid of, they're moving into their winter phase, and you can see Argentina, Ecuador, Brazil, that whole area there is lightening up pretty seriously, and India is slowing down. So you can see that big drop in India there. Now that's reported cases, so we have to see how much of that is actual cases versus reported there. But Argentina is now number 3 in the world. It passed the US in the number of cases. So that's the first time we've seen their name on that list. Europe and the US are both doing fantastic soft landing. So that's fantastic news. That's where we wanted them to come, all the way back down there. So we're in the right trajectory there. And you can see that on the heat map. India is still very red, very dark red. There is the confirmed cases on a daily basis. So still leading the world there. You can see the UK has really done a great job at controlling the surge, but I'm going to show you there's another surge coming up. And Israel has done an incredible job vaccinating the majority of the adult population. There you can see how effective that was in dropping their infection rate. So vaccines do work. So if you track COVID-19 death on a cumulative basis, there the EU, has the most in the world, as kind of a federated state. US is number 2, Brazil, India, and then United Kingdom and Argentina now just showed up to be one, unfortunately, of an area there where we have a lot of mortality. So what's happening? We have dropped from 14,000 deaths per day, which is still a staggering number, to around 12,000 there. That's being driven by India. You can see South America, is not slowing down. Europe is drastically slowing down since they put a lot of restriction in the last couple of months. And the US is continuing its slow progression downwards. So mortality, let's look at South America there. It's a busy graph there, but I want just to focus on the right side. Paraguay, Uruguay, huge number of deaths per million. Compare this to the US. It gives you an idea where the US is. At the worst part of the surge in the US, we were at around 10 deaths per million. They are roughly close to twice that amount there. So it is unfortunately not a good situation there. Argentina is a larger population there, so that's why we see a larger number of cases. Brazil, we've been talking about them with the P1 variants for a long time. So you can see that variant, unfortunately, is not as effective Some of the vaccine down there, the AstraZeneca and the Chinese vaccine, are not as effective against that variant. So you really see the impact. This is a really interesting report that was done by the Economist, and they did a deep analysis there where we have reported worldwide 3.3 million deaths, which is a staggering number. They believe that that number is underestimated by an extra 7 to 13 million. So that's a huge number. The way they did the analysis is that they look in the gray zone, what's reported on a daily basis. And so these are the number of deaths per day, thousands of deaths. And then they basically did an analysis continent and country by country to show that this is in the reddish color, the underreported death. And the worst area there was not Europe and the US, because I think, we underestimated maybe by 15 to 30%. We talked about this several videos ago. But Asia there is the one that we know we're underestimated by a factor as high as 20%, 20 times in some part of India, for example, there. So Asia is really has suffered the most in the amount of actual death as opposed to reported death. And when they did the analysis there, which is not just India, but all this region there in the Southeast Asia there, they came up with that estimates based on the data that is between 2.4 to 7 million deaths alone in Asia versus the 600,000 has been reported. So it's a huge factor of differential there. So instead of the 3 million deaths worldwide, we may be really talking about, between 10 to 20 million people that have really died from unfortunately this horrible virus. So on the analysis that they have done is that they looked at developed countries versus developing countries. And you can see that in the gray zone there are people who are like Japan, Italy, and Britain, the US, and it's the GDP per thousand. So these are the richer country. And then on this area here are the poorer country in the world. And so you look at the excess mortality rate, I think we do a better job at reporting here, but this is where we are totally underreporting in some of this area there. And it's estimated it's a younger population, so then we have a lower fatality rate. But the big worry is that they may get more long COVID, which we've discussed, and we'll discuss more again in the second video, which is people may have long-term damage and not be able to fully work. So that could have a huge impact on these economies. On the global vaccination pace, North America is doing incredible. They've administered 59 doses per 100 people there. That's at least one dose. Europe, that's 46. South America has 27. But this is the problem. On the worldwide basis, if we don't want these variants to come back and haunt us next winter, we have to find a way to vaccinate the rest of the world. And so it's going to be an ongoing battle for the next 18 to 24 months. If you look at all the doses being given, we've given 1.8 billion doses worldwide. That's astonishing for a vaccine that has just recently been approved. I mean, that's an incredible ramp up. Of course, the UK and the US, were leading the charge. Israel had made that special deal with Pfizer there, where they paid an extra price to get more doses in exchange of doing clinical data analysis there that shows that the vaccine is extremely effective. In their case, it was a Pfizer vaccine against infections and variants. And you can see the EU, is ramping up behind us. So they're all going in the right direction. So where are the vaccines going? China, has a huge population there. They've administered, 500 million doses. The US is at 290 million doses. Remember, to be fully vaccinated, you need 2 doses. And so that's per dose. India, has 200 million doses, but that's nothing compared to the size of their population, which is why they're having a hard time controlling this pandemic there. And you can see that Asia is going to be, as we move forward, a bigger pieces of the vaccination as Europe and North America are slowing down in their vaccination process. So advanced economies there are in blue. This is another graphic looking at the GDP versus the number of doses. And really, we totally have a huge problem there in who is going to pay and who is going to give the availability of these vaccines. And there was an initiative called Novavax that's basically trying to do that, but they're having a hard time getting access to the vaccine supply because most of the contract they had done was a plant in India. And all these vaccines manufactured by that plant are now reserved to the Indian population, for all the reasons that, you could understand. So we're having a problem in giving access to those populations there. So on the percent of vaccination of the world, the US is doing great. We've passed the 50% of the population has at least received 1 dose. 40% have received 2 doses. The EU is starting to track behind us, but there's still a big difference there. And these are the countries we've been talking about. We're having a problem with still the infection. The infection is still very active. You can see Brazil, Argentina, and India have only a small percent, only 3% of the population in India are fully vaccinated. And that's why this virus is still spreading very aggressively. Good news on the US side, we have dropped in the last 2 weeks by another 35%. If you look at the number of cases, it's 22,000 cases. It's literally 90% drop from the top of the surge, which was in the December, January was the peak. So that's fantastic. I mean, we're really doing a great job there. And that's because 50% of the population has received 1 dose, but you're going to see in the second video, that may not be enough. If you look at the regional hotspots, this is the graph I showed a month ago, and you can see we had a lot of reds in Florida and some of the Northeast. And the good news is that we still have some problems in Colorado and Wyoming there in Oregon. But most of the country has really dropped drastically, and it's really by a factor of half. We were at 108 cases per 100,000, now we're at 45. So there's still infection, there's still in the community there, but it's getting harder for the virus to find another host and jump from host to host. And you can see this in this trend. Colorado is the only one that is having an upswing. Some other states, are going down at different rates. California you're going to see is doing fantastic. It's the only green one in all the states with very low infection rate. So the country as a whole is doing great. Area for concern, I just mentioned that Wisconsin and Colorado, there's a flare up in this area here, as well as Oregon. And we'll talk a bit more about Oregon later on. And this is the great news. You can see the burden, which is infection rate and transmission rate, has really dropped. You want to get that light color there. The red color is really the hot spot. So we're really going in the right directions there. We just need to continue the projection. As a result of that, the number of cases to children who cannot get vaccinated, we just authorized 12 to 18 years old, but we still have the babies to the 12 years old who don't have vaccine, and they won't be available until probably early 2022. You can see that we're having an increase of the percent of the cases who are, given to children there. And so on the US vaccination, these are fantastic numbers. We have 75% of the population for the age of 65 years old that's fully vaccinated. So the mortality rate really has dropped like a rock for the elderly population. We have 50% of the total population has been vaccinated. And majority have been Pfizer, but Moderna is very close behind. J&J, if you remember, was on hold for a while. And so they have a lower part of the distribution. So unfortunately, the vaccination rate is slowing down. And this is a graphic, I don't want to be political there, but unfortunately, politics is coming into the vaccination. And it's looking at people who voted for the Democrats versus the Republican. And if you look at the percent who have at least 1 dose, and unfortunately, there's clearly a political twist to this vaccination campaign. And please look at my second video there, because it's still a very, very nasty virus that can have a lot of consequences there. If you're not vaccinated yet, please listen to my second video. So vaccination rate has dropped. We were at a peak at 4 million doses, averaging around 3.5 over 7 days. And now we have dropped to 1.5, so a significant drop of the number of people being vaccinated. And we have that hesitancy rate, which is an interesting graphic that gets updated on a regular basis by the government. This is from HHS, and you can see this is the area where we have the flare up in Colorado, Wisconsin. This is the area there, show the hotspot there. And unfortunately, it's the one that they want the least amount of vaccination there. So there is a correlation, unfortunately, and as expected there. So the rural area is an area there where they don't have access to internet, and there may be disinformation or misinformation or lack of information that is making people more hesitant there. And you can see this clearly in this line, a correlation between people who don't have internet and then people who are getting vaccinated. And I'm looking at the people of the age of 18 years old, so clearly 39% of people living in rural counties have been vaccinated versus 46% urban counties there. So we have to really make an effort in helping this population there be educated and comfortable with the vaccine. Face mask is also all over the places in the US. The CDC, as you know, and we talked about this a month ago, has changed its guideline for the face mask. But this was unfortunately also a difference based on different part of the country there. So vaccination versus infection rate. This is a complex graphic, so I'll spend a few minutes on it. This was done by McKinsey there. So to remember there, pretty much that color there, aquamarine, is showing the percent of people fully vaccinated. So they have this decrease in colors there. And then on the other side, you have the number of active cases, and you would expect a relationship. So on the upper left corner here, you have people who are high percent of vaccinated with low amount of cases, which is what you would expect with the vaccine. And then over here, you have people who basically have a low amount of vaccination and high case prevalence. So they basically look at the distribution that we have, and they had some interesting insights. So if you look at this on a state basis, and some states unfortunately don't share their data, you can see that California, which has 0.9% infection rate right now, is really the best one as far as 70% of the adult population is now vaccinated, and it clearly reflects in the infection rate. Another area there that have a lower vaccination rate, still have pretty high infection rate. So vaccination do work, and please encourage people to get vaccinated. California is doing the best right now, and their positivity rate, which is the key metric, is 0.9%. We haven't seen that ever, I think, since this thing started. So this is incredible. And remember, we had these really, really nasty things in Los Angeles. As a result of that, you can see the number of cases have dropped really low, as well as, of course, the mortality rate, which follows. So these are all great news. They've administered 37 million vaccinations so far. This is another matrix there showing that 67.8% of the population have at least received one dose. 51% have received 2 doses there of the 18-year-old. And we're pretty much in the yellow color, and most of the area in Northern California, for example, are totally opening up as far as indoors and meetings and stuff like that. So, and that's tying to the transmission rate. Remember, yellow is good, and low and blue is even better. But you can see the deep surge that we had during the winter, that deep red color there, is really receding there. We still have pockets, and they're tied to the Oregon border. We know Oregon is having a bit of a hot spot right now. And so there's clearly an issue there between Oregon and Northern California, and then some part deep inside California there and close to the Mexican border. But the rest of California there is now in the blue color. I mean, that's astonishing. We haven't seen that in a long time. So these are all great news. So please stay positive, wear a mask, and get vaccinated. And please take a look at the next video. And remember, our next, we're moving to a monthly schedule. So please join me on and listen to the clinical video. There's a lot of good information on the vaccine, the variants, and the effectiveness of the vaccines.